Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. Today we're going to be tackling a topic that's really important for safety professionals, crane operators, and really anyone who's thinking about getting that crane operator license.
Absolutely.
We're talking crane safety and regulations.
Yeah.
And we've got some interesting source material to guide us through this.
Yeah, we're looking at OSHA regulations and interpretation letters.
Wow, those tricky things.
Yes, they are.
All right, well, let's jump right in. So you're getting ready for a job site. Maybe you're even thinking about getting that crane operator license. Where do we even start with all these regulations?
Well, cranes aren't all created equal. Cranes with a lifting capacity over 2,000 pounds are covered under OSHA regulation 1926.1433.
2,000 pounds.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, even a small car weighs more than that.
Exactly. And this regulation covers design construction all the way to testing.
Wow. Okay, so big range of equipment.
Absolutely. And it gets even more interesting because the standards within this regulation actually differ for cranes that were built before and after November 8th, 2008.
Wait, so my crane's birth year actually matters. Why is that?
It does. Safety technology and practices, they evolve, and OSHA updates its regulations to kind of keep pace with those advancements. So a crane from, let's say, 2005 might not be held to the same standards as one that was manufactured in 2015.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all approach.
It's not.
Which makes sense, I guess, because you wouldn't want to hold a vintage car to the same safety standards as like a brand new electric vehicle.
Right. You got to make sure those regulations are relevant for the type of equipment that you're using.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking OSHA here, but I bet they're not the only ones involved in setting these standards.
Absolutely not. We've got organizations like the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, the Power Crane Shovel Association, or PCSA. We've got the German Institute for Standardization, DIN, and the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, ASME.
A global safety summit for cranes. Okay, so why bring in all these different organizations? Is it just to make things more complicated?
Not at all. Each organization brings their own unique perspective and specialized knowledge to the table.
Okay.
Think about it, like building a house. You need architects, engineers, plumbers, electricians, all working together to make sure that structure is sound and safe.
So many moving parts.
Okay.
I like that analogy. It makes sense. You wouldn't want just one person designing and building your entire house.
Too much room for error.
Too much room for error. So all these different organizations are making sure that the crane safety standards are really well-rounded and comprehensive.
Exactly. It's a collaborative effort to make sure that cranes are safe from every angle.
Okay, so out of all these regulations and standards, what's one thing that really sticks out to you? Something that makes you go, wow, that's a smart safety feature.
One that I always think about is the requirement for load hooks to be able to overhaul the line from the highest position.
Overhaul the line. Okay, for those of us who don't speak fluent crane,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
It means that the hook has to be designed in such a way that it can pull the hoist line all the way down, even when it's carrying a load.
Oh, so if something jams the hook, can still lower the load safely.
Precisely. Imagine a scenario where the hoist mechanism malfunctions and the line gets stuck. This feature ensures that that hook can still descend, so you're not just left with this load hanging precariously in the air.
Okay, that makes sense. Like a safety net for the safety net.
Exactly.
All right, so what else is considered like absolutely essential in the crane cab? Besides a good playlist, of course.
Up-to-date load charts and operating manuals are non-negotiable.
Got to have those manuals. But why are those so important? Isn't it all pretty straightforward once you're up there in the cab?
Well, think about it this way. Every crane is different. They have their own weight limits, operating procedures, potential hazards, and those load charts and manuals provide detailed instructions and safety guidelines that are specific to that crane.
So no winging it when it comes to operating a crane.
Absolutely not. The stakes are way too high.
Too high. Yeah. All right. So we've covered the basic standards, but what happens when things go wrong? Let's talk about those uh-oh moments, like when a key component starts to fail, like the brakes, for example.
Yeah, so that's where OSHA's interpretation letters come in. They provide clarification and guidance on specific situations.
Yeah.
And there's a really interesting one regarding galleon dresser cranes and the dangerous practice of using the hydraulic system to compensate for inadequate brakes.
Wait, using hydraulics as a brake? That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. Imagine this. You're operating a crane with faulty brakes.
Okay.
So you're trying to hold the hoist lever in the up position using hydraulic pressure to prevent that load from slipping. It's like trying to stop a moving car by pushing on the dashboard.
I can see where this is going badly.
Yes. If the engine shuts down or there's a hydraulic malfunction, you lose that pressure instantly and that load comes crashing down.
Yikes. Okay, so What's the right way to handle a situation where the brakes are questionable?
First and foremost, employers need to bring in a qualified person, someone who can assess that situation and calculate a reduced load capacity for that crane.
So if the brakes are compromised, you can't just operate at full capacity.
Exactly. It's like trying to haul a ton of bricks in a compact car. Not
Right.
going to work.
Not a good idea. And whatever that reduced capacity is, it needs to be clearly communicated to everyone involved and posted on the equipment itself.
Absolutely. You can't hide it.
All right, so using the hydraulic system as a makeshift brake is a big no-no.
Absolutely. OSHA is very clear on this. It violates safety standards and puts everyone at risk.
Okay, this whole galleon dresser scenario
Yeah.
makes me wonder about modifying cranes in general. Is that even allowed?
It's a great question, and it actually leads us to our next topic, crane modifications.
Okay.
We'll stick with the galleon dresser crane for a minute. Remember that potential solution where they were going to add an assist brake?
Yeah, basically adding another brake to help with the original brake issue.
Exactly. And OSHA doesn't specifically endorse any products or solutions. They just want to make sure things are done safely, regardless of the method.
So they're not going to tell you which brand of assist brake to buy.
No, but they are strict about one thing. You need written approval for any crane modification, and that has to come from either the manufacturer or a registered professional engineer.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. You don't want someone tinkering with those things without really understanding the consequences. It's not like changing a flat tire.
It is not. Even a small modification can impact a crane's stability and safety in ways that you might not even anticipate.
So if you're even thinking about modifying a crane,
Yeah.
step one is contact the manufacturer and engineer, get their take and get it in writing.
Exactly. That written approval is crucial.
All right, so we've talked about those baseline standards, the dangers of those makeshift brake solutions, and getting expert approvals for modifications. Before we wrap up part one of this deep dive, I want to talk about something called derating cranes.
Yeah.
And for this, we'll be looking at another OSHA interpretation letter. This time, it involves a crawler crane, where the manufacturer actually discovered some structural defects after the crane was already being used.
Right.
What happened? Did it come crashing down?
Not quite, but it definitely had the potential for disaster, and this case highlights a really important point. A crane's rating isn't set in stone.
Okay.
It can actually change over time due to wear and tear damage or even those manufacturing flaws that are found after production.
So it's not like buying a car with a fixed horsepower rating.
No.
The crane's capacity can actually go down over time.
Precisely. And in this case, the manufacturer issued what's called a service bulletin,
Okay.
which is basically a document outlining that defect and providing new derated operating procedures to make sure that the crane could still be used safely.
So they basically said, hey, we found a problem. Here's how to operate it safely until we can fix it.
Exactly. And here's the thing. That service bulletin becomes a legally binding operational document.
Woo. So it's not just a suggestion. It's like an addendum to the crane's operating manual.
Exactly. And the operator is legally obligated to follow those new deforated capacities, and limitations, ignoring them would be a direct violation of OSHA.
Yeah, that makes sense. You don't want someone pushing a compromised crane to its limits that's just asking for trouble.
Exactly. And just like those modified load capacities we talked about earlier, these changes need to be clearly communicated. You need updated load charts reflecting those new capacities readily available right there in the crane cab.
Transparency is key. Everyone needs to be aware of the crane's current limitations no matter what's causing them.
Absolutely. Transparency is key. It's about protecting the operator, but really everyone on the job site.
Yeah, that's a good point. This deep dive has been pretty eye-opening, and I'm sure our listeners are starting to realize how important and complex these crane safety regulations really are.
Absolutely. It's a whole world unto itself, but understanding these regulations is essential for anyone that works with or around cranes.
So let's take a step back and kind of recap what we've learned so far. We started off by digging into OSHA regulation, 1926.1433.
Yeah.
That's like the foundation for crane design, construction, and testing.
We saw how those standards can change depending on when a crane was built. Those manufactured after November 8th, 2010 often have stricter guidelines.
And we can't forget that whole team of experts helping to shape those standards. NSI, PCSA, DIN, ASME. It takes a village to keep cranes safe.
It really does. We also got into some real-world scenarios like that galleon dresser crane case.
Oh, yeah.
Where we saw firsthand the dangers of trying to compensate for faulty brakes.
And learned a very valuable lesson. Never, ever use the hydraulic system as your primary braking mechanism.
Never. We also explored the world of crane modifications and the importance of getting written approval from either the manufacturer or a registered professional engineer
Perfect.
before making any changes to a crane.
No DIY projects when it comes to cranes.
No.
And finally, we tackled the concept of derating cranes, understanding that a crane's capacity isn't fixed. It can actually be reduced
Right.
due to things like wear and tear damage or even manufacturing flaws discovered after production.
And in those cases, a manufacturer's service bulletin outlining those new operating procedures actually becomes a legal document. It's like an extension of the crane's operating manual.
Yeah, no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yep.
Wow, okay, so we've covered a lot. It's a lot to digest, but it's all essential knowledge for anyone working with or around cranes.
Absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface, but it's a really solid foundation.
You know, as we've been talking about these regulations, I keep thinking about the human element. We've mentioned qualified personnel, written approvals, clear communication, and readily available information. It seems like crane safety is as much about people as it is about the machines themselves.
That's a really insightful observation. You're absolutely right. Crane safety is a shared responsibility. Manufacturers need to build those cranes to the highest standards. Employers need to provide proper training and oversight, and operators need to exercise caution and good judgment every time they step into that cab.
It's like a chain reaction.
Yeah.
You know, if one link breaks,
Yeah.
the consequences can be pretty serious.
That's why it's so important to create this culture of safety around cranes. It's not just about following the rules.
Right.
It's about understanding the why behind those rules and creating an environment where safety is everyone's top priority.
Well said. So speaking of safety culture, let's shift gears a bit. What are some practical steps that our listeners can take to promote crane safety within their own organizations or on their job sites?
Okay, let's get practical.
Yeah.
It's all about empowering our listeners to be proactive safety advocates.
So step one, where do we even begin?
It might sound simple, but communication is key.
Yeah.
We've talked about the importance of clear communication throughout this whole deep dive, and it's absolutely essential for making sure everyone's on the same page and aware of those potential hazards.
If you see something, say something.
Exactly. Encourage open dialogue about safety concerns. Make sure workers feel comfortable reporting any issues that they see, whether it's a worn-out brake cable, a damaged hook, or even just a feeling that something isn't quite right.
It's kind of creating that no blame culture
Yeah.
where people feel safe speaking up without fear of getting in trouble.
Absolutely. And remember, communication is a two-way street. It's about actively listening to those workers' concerns, taking them seriously, and addressing them quickly and effectively.
So open communication a must, but what about training?
Training is non-negotiable. It is the foundation of a strong safety culture. Make sure all crane operators are properly trained and certified. And it doesn't stop there. Regular refresher courses are essential to keep those skills sharp and everyone up to date on the latest regulations and best practices.
Right, like anything else, practice makes perfect, or at least as close to perfect as you can get when it comes to safety.
And training isn't just for operators.
Right.
Everyone involved in crane operations, from signal persons to riggers to supervisors, they all need to have a clear understanding of their roles and responsibilities when it comes to safety.
So a well-informed team where everyone understands the risks and knows how to mitigate them.
Exactly. And let's not forget about inspections. Regular inspections are like the lifeblood of crane safety.
Uh-huh.
They help identify potential problems before they turn into major hazards.
It's like going to the doctor for a checkup. You know, you might feel fine, but it's always better to catch things early.
That's a great analogy. Encourage a culture of proactive inspections. Make sure operators are conducting those pre-shift inspections before every use, and have qualified personnel perform more thorough inspections on a regular schedule.
And let's not forget about documentation. Keep those detailed records of inspections, maintenance, and repairs.
That documentation can be a goldmine of information. It helps you track trends, identify any recurring issues, and just ensure that those cranes are getting the care and attention they need to operate safely.
So we've got open communication, comprehensive training, proactive inspections, meticulous documentation. Anything else our listeners can do to kind of champion crane safety?
This one's often overlooked, but it's so important. Lead by example.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a supervisor, manager, or a safety professional, demonstrate your commitment to safety in everything you do.
Walk the walk, right? Actions speak louder than words, especially when it comes to safety.
Exactly. If you're consistently following those safety protocols, wearing your PPE, and emphasizing the importance of safety, it sets the tone for the entire team.
And don't be afraid to speak up. You know, if you see something unsafe, even if it means stopping work for a minute.
You are absolutely right. It's much better to address a potential hazard right away than to ignore it and risk an accident. Safety first, always.
So to recap, we've explored the ins and outs of crane safety regulations, gotten into some real-life examples, and discussed some practical steps everyone can take to promote a culture of safety on their job sites.
It's been a great conversation, and I hope our listeners feel empowered to be champions for crane safety.
Now, before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've talked about the importance of following regulations, but what happens when those regulations aren't enough?
Right.
What if you come across a situation where the rules don't quite cover a specific hazard?
That's a great question. And it highlights the importance of critical thinking and going above and beyond the bare minimum.
Right, because regulations are a solid starting point.
They are.
But they can't anticipate every possible scenario. Sometimes you need to use your judgment consult with experts, and think outside the box to come up with a safe solution.
And that's where continuous learning comes in. Stay up to date on industry best practices, new technologies, and those emerging safety trends. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo if you believe there's a safer way to get the job done.
So be informed,
Yeah.
be engaged, and be proactive when it comes to crane safety.
Yes.
Your actions can make a real difference in preventing accidents and keeping everyone safe.
Well said.
Yeah, it really is, always be learning, always be growing when it comes to safety. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the world of crane safety and regulations.
I agree.
We've gone from A to Z today, exploring everything from those foundational OSHA standards to those real-life scenarios to those practical tips
Yeah.
for fostering a safety-first mindset on any job site.
We covered a lot of ground for sure. We explored the complexities of crane design, construction, and testing. We talked about the need for clear communication, those comprehensive training programs, and how vital those inspections are, the thorough documentation, and proactive safety measures.
We even dove into the dangers of trying to make do with faulty brakes.
Right.
Highlighted the need for getting expert approval before making any modifications to a crane, and learned how a crane's capacity isn't a fixed number.
Wow.
It can actually change over time.
Absolutely.
It's been a pretty thorough journey through the world of crane safety, and hopefully our listeners are walking away with a much better understanding of this complex but critical field.
I think so too, and I think the biggest takeaway is that safety is everyone's responsibility.
Yes.
From the people who design and build these powerful machines to the operators who control them, we all have a part to play in preventing accidents and making sure everyone goes home safely at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So be vigilant, stay informed, and always be proactive when it comes to safety.
Yes.
Challenge the status quo. Never be afraid to ask questions, and always speak up if you see something that could compromise safety.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that will bring this deep dive to a close. Thanks for joining us, and stay safe out there.